Hello, global gardeners, and happy Monday. Welcome to February. Can you believe that this year is already flying by? What happened to January? I don't know. All I know is my weather is warming, the sun is out for longer periods during the day, and I can feel the gardening fever beginning to rise. I imagine many of you are in the same mode as the days are getting us so much closer to getting outside. And sorry, Rick, and the rest of you that are beginning to see your season waning. But that's what's so wonderful about this global gardening community is while one of us is waiting to grow, there's another that's already growing. It's so fantastic. Yes, you're probably wondering, I do have some big news today. It's so exciting. There are so many things about gardening that I find exciting. That first tomato of the season that we can just pick off the plant. And for me, it never makes it inside. I eat it immediately from the garden. The same with my raspberries and my strawberries. Everything I grow, that first one of the season is just so special and so exciting. Sometimes I take a picture, most of the time, it just ends up in my mouth, followed quickly by a smile and a warm feeling. And today kind of gives me that same feeling. It definitely makes me smile, definitely gives me a warm feeling. And I hope you all are going to feel the same as we proceed through the show. I'll definitely be answering your questions along the way, and I want you to ask questions. So, those of you that have been watching for a while may know that the Gardner Scott channel goes back to February of 2011. I've been making videos for 14 years. And Tony from Simplified Gardening, who's in the chat right now, has been doing it for the same period of time. Those of us that have these big channels on YouTube have been doing it for a long time. My videos have been seen by more than 40 million people. That probably comes as no surprise to you because you're one of those 40 million people. Over the years, with the hundreds of videos that I've made and all those views, it probably also comes as no surprise to you that I regularly get emails and notifications from companies of all types. They want me to sell their products. They want me to do whatever it is they're doing. Today, I got an email from Prada saying that my channel closely matches their merchandise. Prada, high fashion. So much of what we get that those of us that have these big channels are just these worthless emails that are being sent to thousands of channels. And maybe someone will say, yeah, I want to make a video about wearing Prada. I'd love to have some Prada, but no, I'm not going to make a video about it. This channel's all about gardening. So it was extra special 2 years ago when I got one of those emails, and it was about gardening and it was about my channel. And it was from someone who knew me and liked what I was doing on YouTube. It was an editor from Firefly Publishing, and they asked if I would write a book. Well, I had to think about it because I'm just a humble gardener. I make some videos. I know I have a lot of followers, I have a lot of views, but I wasn't sure if I could write a book. And then, of course, Tony O'Neill has written 3 books. And Tony and I have talked over the course of many years about his books and about his efforts, how challenging it is, how much time it takes. And I still wasn't sure if I wanted to write a book. But through the encouragement of others, including Tony, I decided I would. And the news is on March 1st, my first gardening book is being released in the United States, and it's coming out April 1st in the UK. It's Gardner Scott's Guide to Raised Bed Gardening. Now, you can see why I'm excited about it. It is exciting to be able to put all of this experience that I have. All of these lessons that I've been putting into my videos is coming out in a book. And I followed Tony's lead. Tony's books are what I recognize as reference books, books that you have in your gardening library that you can refer to over and over again because it's packed with information. My book is over 300 pages, all about raised bed gardening, hundreds of photos about raised beds. It's a book not only to be used as a reference, but I wrote it to be encouraging, to be a motivator. So the photos are of all types of raised beds, landscape raised beds, flower beds, vegetable garden beds, all kinds of beds, and so much more to the book. So that's the big news. I've written a book and it's coming out. In the description below, I have a link that you can actually pre-order it on Amazon right now. And because Firefly Publishing is a pretty big publishing house, it's also going to be available at your local bookstore. Now, it hasn't been shipped yet, but you can go to your bookstore and ask to pre-order it if you don't want to do Amazon. This is just so exciting for me. I'll be appearing on podcasts and live streams. There's actually a marketing department that's setting all of this up. And so it's just so exciting. And I've known about this, of course, for quite a while. It took me over a year to write the book, and then took about 6 months for us to go through the editing and the layout, matching the photos with the text. There were a lot of photos that I didn't have, and I had to find to match in the book. And almost all of the photos are photos that I took. I do, of course, give credit to the few photos that came from others. So be sure to look when you get your copy of the book where the photos came from, because some of them are from other gardeners that you know on YouTube. So that's the huge news. And so let's go to the comments and see what's exciting, because I think this is so fantastic. Linda says, congratulations. I can't wait to order your book. So excited. Thank you for that. That's so awesome. String Striker 3 says, amazing. Congratulations to you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Lily is saying, congratulations. Deb is saying, awesome. Mobius 981, congratulations. Outlier Gardener, ooh, a book from Gardner Scott. That's how I feel as well. It's one of those things that I've been asked by some of you over the years to write a book. It's not a new idea. I've thought about it for a long time. I just wasn't sure if I knew enough. When I started writing, I recognized that, yeah, I did. And so I have a lot of books or a lot of videos about raised beds. And we've talked about raised beds in these live streams, but the book actually puts it all together. And there's a lot more to it than just raised beds. I am such a believer in good soil. You know that there's a whole chapter on nothing but soil. So even if you don't do raised bed gardening, you can learn about how to build a good soil. And I give my recipe for building a soil. I have some recipes from other gardeners and authors that you may be familiar with. And I compare the different methods of building soil, talk about all the amendments you can use. I talk about planning. I'm huge with planning. You know that well. So there's a section on how to plan your garden for the different months of the year. Now, of course, it does have that slant for raised bed gardening, because one of the things I love about raised beds, particularly in the vegetable garden, where you have a nice rectangular or square bed, you can build your grid and you can develop your plan based on the grid. I talk about that in the book. I talk about extensive gardening and how you can actually lay out your seeds or your plants in certain patterns to maximize the number of plants in a given space. There's just so much. It's so incredible. I wrote so much for this book that we had to actually slash a lot of the pages because it just got too big. And there is a certain limit, I think, when it comes to reference books that we use in the garden. Tony's saying, so amazing, Scott, really made up for you. So that's awesome. Thank you, Tony. Linda just placed my pre-order for the book. Thank you, Linda. I do appreciate that. That's fantastic. Owen says, let the Barnes and Noble know people. Yes, thank you for that. I have a couple Barnes and Noble near me, and I'm working and actually trying to get a book signing at one of my local Barnes and Noble. But absolutely, this is going to be shipped to bookstores. So go to your Barnes and Noble and ask about Gardner Scott's Guide to Raised Bed Gardening by Scott A. Wilson. It's not by Gardner Scott. It's actually by Scott Wilson. That's my name, and most of you don't know that. And that's how we get the word out. It's just by letting the sellers know that gardeners want books, that gardeners want this information. And you are the kind of audience, you're the kind of community. It's all about that information and sharing the information and using the information and just being a gardener as opposed to just someone who dabbles. I think we all are more than just dabblers. So this is so fantastic. Rachel says, congratulations, such a big step for you. Thank you. It is. It's been so wonderful to watch you grow while teaching us how to grow. Love it. Well, thank you for that, Rachel. And Tony says, people don't realize the work involved. So yeah, let me talk a little bit about that because these conversations that I've had with Tony at Simplify Gardening as he was doing his books, there were months, for those of you that follow the Simplified Gardening channel, that Tony didn't release books. And you may have noted, or didn't release videos. And you may have noticed on my channel over the last 6 to 9 months in particular, that I haven't released as many videos as I used to. And a year ago is when it really started. And my video count had to decrease because of how much time I was devoting to writing the book. During the months last year of March and April in particular, I was working 8 to 10 hours a day on the book. And then when we actually started getting to the editing and the photo lineup page in our photo layout of the pages in August and September, those were still 4 and 6 hour days. It's a lot of work to write a book. Now, I'm not saying that for sympathy. I'm just letting you know that it does take a lot of work to put a book together. And that's why I'm so excited because it's done. It's been finished. And now to actually be able to see that it's coming and I can share it with others. Oh, it's just so fantastic. Our Hen House 3 says already pre-ordered. That's awesome. Nancy says, cool, can't wait to read it. I think it's a good read. It really is. It probably comes as no surprise to you that the book, the message, the tone is going to be quite similar to my videos. The way I talk on these live streams is going to be the way I talk in the book. So it's not pretentious. I don't try to come up with any fancy phrasing. It's just Gardner Scott and my guide to raised bed gardening along the way. Thank you, Jay. There's the link for the book on Amazon. Now, I've been working with the marketing department at Firefly and asking about the variation. And so as far as the dates, it's a Canadian publishing company. So it will come out in Canada and the United States on March 1st. And there's a delay for shipping and setup, and that's why it doesn't come out until April 1st in the UK. And I'm going to ask the question, Rick. I don't know for sure, but about Australia, I don't know what the release plan is for Australia, but I'm definitely going to push for that because I know as a global gardener, we have Aussies and Kiwis that would be interested in a raised bed gardening book. This isn't a book written just for me and my garden. This is a book written for gardeners all over. Some of the photos come from other states. Some of the photos come from other countries, believe it or not. So that's the cool thing about gardening, and especially raised bed gardening and the processes of gardening, is it isn't just a Colorado thing, and it's not just a Gardner Scott thing. It really is going to be one of those things that can benefit a whole bunch of people. And thank you for that, Tony. It's going to be a bestseller. That would be awesome, And so here's the way I look at it. And Tony knows this. Tony's written 3 books. I've written one. And yes, before anyone asks, I've started working on a second book because I recognize it's going to take at least a year to write it. And then it's going to take months after that to get it ready before it's available. But I'm kind of hooked right now. The idea of taking all this information from these hundreds of videos and these decades of experience, and especially based on your support, you all, I say this every week, you all in this community and your support of this community just really gives me the motivation to keep doing what I'm doing. And this is just another step in the journey that I'm on in this wonderful gardening community that we have. And so I I like the idea. Yeah, I didn't write this book to be a bestseller, but it is one of those things. It's a business, not for me, but for the publisher. So if it does become a bestseller, they're going to ask me to write a second book. How awesome is that? And then I'll be doing this again and being able to talk about it. Eileen is saying, can't wait to read it. Any way to get an autographed copy? So I've been thinking about that, and any of your suggestions, by all means, I will take them. So I'm planning to try to do book signings wherever I have the opportunity to do book signings, and at least in the beginning, it'll be in Colorado. But I've already been talking to try to do with the marketing department at Firefly to try to get the possibility of doing some signings in other places beyond just Colorado. So when those happen, I'll definitely announce them through the community page on my YouTube channel. I may make a video about it to tell you about some of these different places that I'll be going if I can actually tie it in. But I'm also trying to figure out how I can do signed copies beyond and in person. So once we figure that out, it may involve sending it through the mail. I know that isn't the best option, but if I come up with a good selection or good suggestion, I'll let you know about that. And yeah, I'd love to be able to autograph books and be able to do it because it is one of those kind of things that I know others would appreciate. And I would love to be able to sign and give you a personal message. Bud says, I've been expecting this for years and I'm thrilled. Well, thank you, Bud. Yeah, Bud's been following along for a long time on this channel. And I think you may have been one of the ones years ago, Bud, that actually had asked about me writing a book. So thank you for that. Congrats. Thank you. If you follow others, I know this is only the first of more to come. So thank you for that, Bud. It's interesting. The book that they had asked me to originally write was about birdhouses because I have a video about making birdhouses and I have a video on attracting birds to the garden, and I have videos about fountains and wildlife. And so that was their first thought, was for me to write a book about birds and wildlife in the garden. And that book may come. It's not the next one or two that I'm thinking about. But, for me, getting the information out, credible information, valid information, research-based information is really what's so important on my channel. I try to avoid anecdotal information. If it is something that hasn't been tested or doesn't have research behind it, then it's something that I've done. And I'll make a video about things I've done and give you my experiences. You can see those in my videos. But for a book in particular, I didn't want just a pamphlet. I didn't want one of those things that so many of us have been cheated on. You go to Amazon and you see a topic of something you like and you order it and you get it and you realize it's a 35 or 40-page pamphlet of worthless information. And I didn't want that. I wanted a real hearty book with all that credible and valid and research-based information in it. So I said, no, I won't write a book about birdhouses and wildlife in the garden because I don't consider myself an expert in that. I don't know enough about that to justify me writing a book and then selling it to people just for the sake of selling a book. And I will never do that. And as we discussed back and forth with the editor, I said, raised beds. That's what I'm passionate about. That's what I do so much of. That's what I know a lot about. And that's what we decided on for this first book, was raised bed gardening. And so I talk about the history of raised bed gardening and some of my history with gardening and how I discovered raised beds. And even though I'm a huge advocate of raised beds, I also talk about why raised beds are not necessarily the best choice for all gardeners. So I give the pros of raised beds, but I also acknowledge the cons. I acknowledge that raised beds aren't that magic panacea that's going to solve all of your garden problems. And I say that in the book. I give the options for gardeners in different situations. I talk about in-ground gardening, I talk about container gardening, and then of course I mostly focus on raised bed gardening. So even though I love raised beds, and like I said, I'm a huge advocate, there's much more in this book than just gardening in raised beds. It's a gardening book. And it's designed for brand new gardeners to learn about soil, to learn about planning, to learn about the basics. I talk about watering, I talk about pruning, I talk about trellising, but it's also a book for more experienced gardeners because I go into the layout of intensive gardening and, like I said, how you can get the most plants in a given space. And I talk about the different ratios that you would use of organic matter in soil to get the best soil. And so, like Tony's books that include the basic information along with the science behind it, that's the approach I've taken. And Karen is at a Garden for All Seasons says, come to a book signing in Dallas. I'd like to do that. Actually, Dallas is a long day's drive from me, so that's possible. It's an easy flight. So go to your bookstore and get all your Dallas and Fort Worth gardening friends together and go to a store and say, you want to do a book signing, and then have them contact Firefly Publishing, and who knows? That would be so cool if I could travel around to all these groups of gardeners, you and your friends, your garden clubs, and do a book signing. Yeah, I would gladly do that. And I'm not in this for the money, so it's not like I'm going to charge some big fee to go do it. I think it's just a great opportunity to get out with other gardeners face to face, and the book is a way that may enable me to actually do some of that. Bohemian Herbology says, so excited. I just pre-ordered. Right on. Thank you for that. That's so awesome. DJ says, this is very exciting news. I can't wait to receive my copy. I'm hoping that I can come down and have it signed. Yeah, so definitely. I will, if I don't get all of the local book sellers and we can't set that up, then for those that are within driving distance of Colorado, yeah, I'll set something up. Maybe we can pick a location and do it. So that's to be figured out. There's more to come along those lines. But yeah, I think it is definitely one of those things that we can do. Gina says, done, pre-ordered. Oh, thank you so much for that. Dusty Flat says, careful you get the right book, as there is another Scott Wilson author. Yeah, so that's why it's by Scott A. Wilson, because I do recognize that, believe it or not, Scott Wilson is a relatively common name. And so I didn't have to, I chose to do Gardner Scott's Guide to Raised Bed Gardening by Scott A. Wilson. Now, I'm not aware that there's another Scott Wilson writing gardening books, but just to be sure, that's one of those things that I wanted to avoid confusion. Masabi Gal, I asked you a couple of years ago if you were writing a book. I'm delighted you did it, and I will ask my local bookstore to order it. Congratulations. You are so right. Like I said, there are so many of you that over the years have asked about it. And it wasn't until that offer And I actually have had a couple publishing companies since then that have also contacted me to write a book. So it it's it's inexplainable, just the excitement when somebody recognizes not only that you are passionate about a particular subject, but that you're knowledgeable enough about that subject that they want to support it through the publishing of a book. It's just incredible. Pat says, please post book signing dates as soon as you know. Just bought 2 copies. Well, thank you for that, Pat. I know you're just down the road. Absolutely. Absolutely. I will post, and I'll do more than just a single posting. So you can expect on the Gardner Scott Facebook page, I'll absolutely post there. On the YouTube community page, I'll definitely post there. On Instagram, Gardner Scott, I'll definitely post there. So I want this to be the kind of thing. So I'm a gardener. I'm a passionate gardener. You all know that. When I go to a bookstore, probably like you, I look in the gardening section. I'm looking at gardening books. When I go to a bookstore, I also look in the discounted book section. And so often in that discounted book section, there's a lot of gardening books. It's great for me because I just add to my hundreds of gardening books with a discount. But that tells me that bookstores in particular may not give the credit to gardening and gardening authors that maybe we deserve. I mean, it's great that we can get books on a bargain table, but I think it would be so much more awesome if the book industry recognized that there's a lot of us out here. There's a lot of gardeners that are clamoring for this good information. And yeah, maybe if this becomes a bestseller and the bookstores are being approached by gardeners to say, hey, do you have this book? Then maybe the publishing companies will ask more gardeners to write more books. Gardening is one of those things that you can never know everything. I know, I've tried. That's why I keep getting all these books and I keep trying all these different methods. You can never know everything about gardening. So there's always a new approach. There's always a new way to do things. And I've been trying to do my part to get the word out. And it's up to the businesses to recognize that we're a big audience and we matter and we care. Serena says, Gardner Scott just pre-ordered your book. Thank you, Serena. Did you see my question about the 10 raised beds? I did not. I was asking if soil samples from all 10 beds should be mixed or separate 5 years ago, previous soil tests. So that's a really good question. And I actually, I talk a little bit about this in the book because I think soil tests are important to figure out a baseline. I did a video a couple years ago where I did a follow-up test of a couple of my raised beds. And so one thing I haven't talked a lot about and still haven't made the video yet because I haven't been satisfied with the videos that I've made on the pressure treated wood. And a couple years ago, Oregon State University actually contacted me and asked if I would help them do some studies for a research that they were doing on pressure treated wood, because many of my beds are done with pressure treated wood. And I also have beds that are metal, and I also have beds that are wood that's not been treated for the pressure treating process. And so for that, I took samples of every one of my beds and sent them to Oregon State. And what the results showed were actually part of their study, showed that pressure treated wood has no effect whatsoever on the garden soil. It's perfectly safe. There's nothing to worry about. But it also made available to me the awareness that even though my beds are mostly the same, they're all different. The soil is different in every single bed. And that's partly because I built my beds at different times. And when I talk about planning a garden in the book and building raised beds, I talk about that. Start small with a bed or two, and then you can expand as you learn more about what kind of beds you like, what kind of soil you're going to use. And that's what I did. So for me, when I test the soil in my raised beds, I do it separately. Each bed gets its own test because the soil in that bed is unique, because I took that approach. The way I amend varies from year to year. So one of my beds, the one that's just over my shoulder here, is a bed that I took the grow bags. So when I grew potatoes a few years ago, at the end of the season, I harvested the potatoes, and then I took the soil from those grow bags and I put it into this bed, none of the others. The next year, when I was making the leaf mold, I used that primarily as amendment in a different bed. And so each of these beds have amendments, nice, wonderful soil, but those amendments are different from one year to the next and from one bed to the next. So if you're gardening similarly, where every bed is different, then I would suggest taking samples, multiple samples from within the bed, but keep those samples together for your soil testing. If you're using the same soil throughout your garden beds, then yes, you can combine the samples from all 10 beds and send them all together. And that will give you a general baseline of your soil. So just keep that in mind. That what are you trying to find out? If you're trying to find out that your soil has reached adequate nutrition for your plants, and maybe you can take a year or two off from amending, then you could do a group of beds if they've all received similar amendments. If you're trying to determine if one bed is better than another, then you might want to do that individual focus on the beds. So if you're just joining us 30 minutes into the show, the big news today is that Gardener Scott's Guide to Raised Bed Gardening, the book, is coming out March 1st on Amazon in your local bookstores here in the United States. And it's coming out April 1st on Amazon and your local bookstores in the UK. So that's just so exciting. So James says, pre-ordered mine too. Thanks, Scott. Well, thank you, James. I think that's fantastic. I'll be talking about this, of course, in the weeks ahead. In the next few weeks, we actually have some really wonderful guests that are going to be on the show. So I won't be focusing on my book, but you can expect to hear much more about it as it gets closer. Bohemian Herbology says, absolutely phenomenal. My pre-order said March 3rd for delivery. It's going to help so many. Wonderful news. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, it's available on March 1st. And so in your bookstore, you should be able, they should have boxes in the back. I don't exactly know how that works, but if you've gone in ahead of time and done a pre-order, then they'll definitely ship it to the bookstore and you can have it on March 1st. If you order through Amazon, it takes 2 days to ship. And so that's why they say it's available on March 3rd. Bettina says, exciting news. Congratulations, Gardener Scott. Thank you for that. Amy says, I'm curious if you can describe what you think the majority of the focus of the book is. Is it more building, planning a raised garden, or planning, maintaining, planting with the beds, all zones? So it's an entire process of gardening. And so the majority of the focus is gardening, the process of gardening. Now, in much of that, it talks about doing it in a raised bed. So I talk about building the soil in general and what good soil is and what a good ratio of different ingredients in a soil should be. And then I say, when I fill my raised beds, this is the soil mix that I use in my raised beds. And then I compare it with other mixes that other books talk about. I talk about planning and how to plan a garden, how to select your seeds, how to select what plants you're going to grow, how to select how many plants you're going to grow, sources for seeds, sources for plants. And then I tie it into in a raised bed based on the style of planting. This is what you can fit into a raised bed. But it's also, and I'll do a balance throughout the book where I'll also talk about if you're not doing it in a raised bed, this is an option you can choose, because like for planning how many plants you're going to put in, I talk about how in raised beds you've got a nice defined space for planning, and then you've got the walkways between the beds. In an open garden, in ground garden, you've got the pathways running through that open space that kind of are the same thing, but not clearly defined as they would be in a raised bed. So it's that kind of thing. I talk about watering, and the watering is universal, but I've got pictures of me in my raised bed garden watering. I talk about pests and how to manage pests in the garden. And so that is also general information and universal for all types of gardens. But then I talk about how using raised beds, you can do some specific methods to deter pests or to basically segregate any pests that you might have in the garden. And then, of course, I do have an entire chapter, I think it's the biggest chapter, on actually building raised beds. So I have step by step with photos how to build different types of wooden beds, stone beds, metal beds, hybrid beds. And of course, that whole section is very targeted and focused on raised beds in particular. And then I have a section where I talk about uh, garden activities and what you would do during the course of a year, what you do in spring, what you do in summer, what you do in fall, what you do in winter. And of course, that's also universal. But I will talk about some of the things like the hoops and the preparation for your beds, the preserving of the wood, those kind of things. So for the most part, Amy, it's a general gardening book. And so you don't have to be a raised bed gardener to get benefits from that information. But then it does have a tie-in to the building and the planning and the maintaining that is more specific for raised beds. So while I love raised beds and I think overall raised beds make gardening easier, it does require a little bit more information, a little bit more planning, a few more steps than just having open ground and taking a hoe and digging a furrow and putting some plants in that space. So that's a big aspect of the book, is the differences between in-ground gardening and the using raised beds to get some of the benefits that I think raised beds can offer gardeners that you might not definitely find someplace else. Rick says, I like the cover photo. Well, thank you for that. I took that picture, and that's actually one of the demonstration gardens here in Colorado Springs for the Horticultural Art Society. I used to be a trustee of the Horticultural Art Society here in Colorado Springs, and I visit their garden often, and I saw that picture, and it's like, I love this picture. And the editors loved that picture too, and they suggested that for the cover, and I agreed. I think it's wonderful. Outlier Gardeners asking, will signed copies be available, perhaps in your merch shop for shipping also? Oh, I hadn't thought about that. There you go. I said if I could figure out a way to do it, that may be a way to do it. So let me look into that and see what I can set up as we get a little bit closer. And yeah, that may be, because I was thinking if you buy a book and then you ship it to me and then I sign it and then I ship it back to you, there's just too much expense involved there. But I might be able to figure out how to do it through a merchandise shop and be able to include the shipping and save some money. But don't have an answer for that yet. And I don't want to say that that's definitely going to work, but I'll take that suggestion and see what I can do about it. So Llama's asking a hint on what the next book will be focused on. So a hint, not yet. Give me a few months to flesh out if what I think is suitable for a book can actually be the book that I do. And when I decide, then I'll give you a hint. So thanks for asking that. It's one of those things that uh, don't want to let the cat out of the bag too soon. Big Will Dog saying, Gardner Scott and Simplified Gardening. I have a hard enough time editing videos. There's no way I'd sustain editing an entire book. Good on you both. Well, thank you for that. Yeah. And that, like I said at the beginning, I thought long and hard about whether I would do it because it takes a long time to shoot and edit a video. And I knew it was going to take a long time to write a book because of what Tony had told me. And I was hesitant. And it's absolutely true. It takes a long time to write a book. And there's a lot of times that you want to give up because it just takes over your life. But I think it's well worth it. Patrick, thank you for supporting me so much. You reap what you sow on. Congrats. Thank you. I do appreciate that. Okay, let's see. I know I'm behind a little bit, and Mobius is saying, do I hear a series in the works? Possibly. That's why I say, like Tony's written 3 books, and he's probably got another 3 books in his mind that he's thinking about. And that's kind of where I'm at right now is, my videos, for those of you that have been following my videos for years, know that they follow a natural progression, particularly at my new house. If you go back 5 years and look at my videos, you'll see that my current garden was literally not there. It was nothing. It was just bare ground. And so over the course of the last 5 years, it's been a natural progression where I not only show what I'm doing and how I'm doing it and talk about why I'm doing it, but I do it with that progression in mind so that you could follow along. If you wanted to build a garden from scratch, you could start from my videos 5 years ago and follow along and see exactly how my big garden has gotten to the state it is now with all these beds and all these plants. It wasn't like that 5 years ago. And so as I look at the possibility for a series of books, I have that same thought in mind. What kind of things do gardeners want or need to know that will help them on the journey? And then you put the series together and it gives you the guidance to be able to garden the way that you want to garden. And yeah, that's on my mind. That's one of those things that I have been thinking about. So we'll see. It's too early to say, but it's definitely a possibility. And we'll just have to wait and see. And it would be great to see the success with this book and then go from there and get that series started. Shandy's Garden says, what about a "This book belongs to" sticker or "Thanks" sticker, "To me, your signature as the from"? That's a custom and special idea. Ooh, that's a good idea too. In fact, that would be pretty easy, I think. So yeah, let's add that to the mix. If I would say let's start with that idea, because I'm not sure how I could get all the books to send to people through a merchandise store. But I like that idea that when you get your book, send me an email to gardnerscott@gardnerscott.com. And for now, let me look into that, and I will plan to send you something that you can put in the book, either a handwritten note or a sticker, whatever it happens to be. But yes, I'll definitely be able to do that. That's easy. And then I'll keep working on the idea of actually selling books myself. I really didn't want to get into the book selling arena as a way to do the signed copies, but I like that idea of something that I could give you that you could add to your book. So thank you for that suggestion. I really do like that idea, and I'll definitely move forward with that. And that's easy. It's definitely easy. It just cost me the price of a stamp. That's nothing. So cool. Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm Just Stardust says, I'm sure it must have been a lot of work writing this book, but at the same time, it must have been so much fun and a great opportunity to learn a lot of things, even for you. And you're exactly right. And so it was a ton of work, and it was so much fun at the end. During the process, it's a bit of a headache. Uh, the editor that I worked with, actually worked with two different editors. The editor that I worked with at the end was wonderful. Julie was just a fantastic editor and really helped form the image of the book. So when I wrote the book, I turned in the manuscript based on, you have to do the contract, all that kind of stuff. So I just turned in the manuscript, no photos at all. Now I had written it with photos in mind, but the manuscript was then approved by the editor, and we started the process of creating a book. And so I had a whole chapter on how to save money in gardening, how to get all of the different parts of gardening, not just for raised beds, but for gardening in general, how to save money, how to get things at less cost, how to get things for free, how to take advantage of people, how to go to businesses. I had a whole chapter on that. Well, what ended up happening, I would have never thought this, but that's where the editor comes in. Julie, the editor, actually took that information and incorporated it throughout the book. So instead of a single chapter on how to save costs, in the chapter where I talk about soil and amendments, there's little sidebars on how to save money when you build your soil. And in the section about building beds, there's tips on how to save money when you build your beds. And in the section on tools and watering, there's those tips. So that's the cool thing about the editing process, especially when you have an editor that was as enthusiastic as mine, is the book actually becomes much more readable and much more accessible because they've done this before. And putting all the pieces together, that's why it took many months to finish that process. And then my words, after my words were done, I then put in where I anticipated the photos to go. And I thought I had a lot of photos. Not the case. Julie's like, I love this section. We need a photo to go with this section. And we need a photo for this section. And a lot of those how to build ideas, she said, we need more photos for some of these how to's. And so I spent a lot of time recreating and finding opportunities to take some of those photos to match the text after the book was written. I've been taking photos for years and years and years and thinking I had the perfect photos, and that wasn't always the case. So it is one of those things that was fun. It really was fun when I had a section and I needed a photo, and then I saw it. I did so many garden tours, and I went to so many gardeners' gardens, and I see what they're doing, and it's like, that's perfect. That needs to be in the book. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And so it's just fantastic to me that I was able to tour so many different gardens and be able to share what others are doing, because except for the ones in my garden, and there's a lot of photos from my garden, of course, both the winter pictures and the summer pictures and everything in between. But there's a lot of photos from just average, regular, everyday neighborhood gardeners showing what they do in their backyard. So this isn't a coffee table book with nothing but pretty pictures. It's real life. It's what some gardeners are doing. And some of the pictures would not make it in a coffee table book because they're not necessarily pretty gardens, but they're efficient gardens and they're effective at what they're doing. And that's why they're included in the book. So it was so much fun to be able to include other gardeners' gardens in the book, particularly when it matches the text about something that I'm, discussing and trying to display. Denver Botanic Garden has a lot of photos in it. Up in Denver, a big botanical garden, and I took a lot of photos from there to show how the professionals do it, how a professionally designed bed looks. And then on the next page is a photo from just a backyard garden. So lots of different information interspersed throughout the book. Tony's saying, one thing I've done is when I'm in areas I don't normally go in, pop into the bookstore and sign all the copies on the shelf so people will get a signed copy. Oh, I like that idea. So thank you for that, Tony. That's a good suggestion. I will follow that guidance as well. I just pop into a bookstore and sign the copies as well. Thank you. Wonderful. Amy says, perhaps some larger book clubs could petition your publisher to show there's people to get you to come out. Oh, absolutely. And I don't know how exactly that works. I'm still learning the process. I've been asking a lot of questions of the marketing department. But yeah, definitely. If you've got a garden club and you've got a group that is interested, contact Firefly Publishing and let them know that you're interested in having Gardner Scott come to your garden club, and then they'll pass it on to me, and we'll see what we can do. That would be pretty interesting. Tony's saying, will you be amazed, mate? Neither Scott or I ever thought we would release a book. I know it is. It's one of those things that, Tony and I go back years. I think our first collaboration video was probably 5 years ago. And we've talked a lot of emails back and forth. And we've both been on YouTube for over a decade. And we were just gardeners sharing information because we both recognized that YouTube needs that fact-based and beneficial information. And yeah, neither of us thought we would write a book, but the time came and it seemed right. And now you can get our books. I know it still sounds crazy for me to say that, but now you can get our books. Bote Life, nice to see you. This is so exciting. Huge congrats to you. Thank you and your team. Yeah, Mala and Lika are very excited about it as well. In fact, as you might guess, I do have some photos with my dogs in the book. The book was done before I got Lika, so Lika's not in the book, but Lily's in the book and Mala's in the book. My granddaughters are in the book, and that's my team who helps put it all together. So absolutely. And there's actually, I'm not sure if Sean is still on, but there's actually a photo of my garden club that's in the book. So it isn't just me. This is a gardening community. And though I might be the author and I might be the photographer, yeah, there is a big team involved. Good choice on adding the middle initial. There is a Scott Wilson that wrote Ready, Set, Grow, but it's about churches. Okay, that's good to know. So I'm glad that I could do it. Karen says, can't wait to see it. I'm sure even as a long-term gardener, there's quite a bit that I could still learn from your book. Already telling some of my friends to buy it. Well, thank you, Karen. And so I saw Sean had signed in earlier, and Karen are both in my gardening club. And I saw Karen a week or so ago, and Karen's garden is actually got some spots in the book. So it's so nice that I could have not only garden friends locally, but able to put some of the pictures in the book. Now, one thing that I didn't do, and go ahead and put in the comments if you would support this. So in the front of the book, there's a section because all the photos are copyrighted, and I have the copyright for the book, and I wanted to make sure that the photos that weren't mine did get that copyright recognition because they're owned by the person that took the photograph. And so for my next book, what I'm thinking, because I want to expand it to be more than just my garden, is I'm thinking about opening it up to some of you. This book has pictures of people in my garden club, garden tours here in my city. And so I'd really like to try to incorporate more global gardens, literally, to be part of what I'm developing. It's too early yet to even figure out what kind of photos I want. But if that's something that you think I should pursue, just enter it in the comments. And then when I get closer to that, I'll make a video or talk about it on a live stream, tell you what I'm looking for. And then if you have it, you can send me your photo to put into the book. You would retain the copyright to it. And now your garden, your beds, whatever it happens to be, would be in whatever that next book happens to be. So that's the approach I want to take. It's not all about me. It really is all about the gardening community and sharing the information, because I don't know it all. I'm trying to share as much of what I know as I can, but there's a lot more information out there. And as I wrote the book, I did learn some things. As I began to lay out how I plan, how I plant, how I put my garden together, and then tried to put it into raised beds, I recognize that a lot of what I do is just general gardening information, but I wanted it to be accurate information. And so I went back to school. I did research to be able to validate what I was doing along the way. And whenever you do that, whenever you read research papers, and whenever you make that kind of in-depth focus on a particular subject, you're going to learn. And so I added some stuff to the way I do things that I've never talked about before, that is now in the book, partly because of that extra research, just to make sure what I was saying was accurate. And I love that. I love learning about gardening, and I love doing more and more when it comes to gardening. And so the whole process really is very enjoyable. Laura says, I love having physical books. Me too. The way the information really doesn't disappear. I have saved recipes and information online, and I have gone back and it's gone. Absolutely. I still refer to the books I have in my library all the time. My library actually helps set up my gardening laboratory in some degree. But yeah, it's one of those things that the ability to go to a book, you have an idea, a thought of, I saw this thing and I want to know more. You can go to your book and be able to find it. And yeah, you can do a Google search, but Google just regurgitates the same information that everybody else is looking for. And a lot of times that information is not good, or it's lacking. The book really is a nice resource, and I love having my books to be able to go to, and to be able to pick up and thumb through. And it may take longer to find what you're looking for in a book versus a search on Google, but it's so much more enjoyable when you find it, because then you end up sitting down and reading more of the book. So absolutely love that. Kathy says, great news. I will hope to be at a signing. I'll help you there too. Lisa says, pre-ordered mine. Wonderful. Absolutely great. Lily says, do you do your own soil tests? So I do a couple different things. So I do some basic testing, just feeling and figuring out the ratios. I've been thinking about doing a video, the water and the quart jar test, just to figure out how my ratios are going. But for the actual soil test, I do send them out, and I've got a link below to the soil testing that I send mine to. And that's what I've done for the follow-up testing. So my initial testing, I actually took all my samples before any beds were done, sent them to Colorado State University, got an in-depth reply. I've got a video that shows the results of that soil test. But since then, I do RX soil testing, and I did a video about that as well and showed the results. Much easier. You order online, they send you a box, you put your soil sample in the box, send it to them, and then they let you know when the test is done, and it's all online for those results. So it was faster, and easier to do the RX soil. And you can see that link in the description below. So different types of testing depending on what it is I'm doing. Pretty much amend my beds every year, my raised beds in particular. But when it gets close to 3 or 4 years of amending every year, that's when I start doing some of those physical, personal tests myself, where I'm doing my own observation and figuring it out. I haven't done the microscope yet to see what kind of life is actually in the soil. But for the most part, to get the analysis, I'll send that off to RX soil and get the laboratory analysis to see what's going on with that. And there's Jay again. Thank you so much for that, Jay, with the link to Gardener Scout's Guide to Raised Bed Gardening. If you're just joining, that's the big news for the day. Is I've got a book coming out on March 1st in the United States and Canada, and April 1st in the UK. Now, one thing that's really cool that I also hadn't thought about. So when I make my videos, recognizing the global audience, when I mention a temperature, I will show the Celsius for what that happens to be. And not always, but for some of my videos, when I give a measurement, I'll break that down into metric as well. Well, this being a Canadian publishing house, Firefly Publishing, that's how we set up this book. So whenever I'm dealing with temperature, it's both Fahrenheit and Celsius. And when I'm dealing with like the soil and we're talking about the measurements, the volumes, it includes the metric as well. And then some of the other areas where there's a difference between the American system and the UK system, we have those corrections already in the book. So for those of you in the UK and Canada, you don't have to worry about that. That's already done in the book. You don't have to worry about making any corrections. Sometimes it's actually in the text. Sometimes it's in one of those little boxes off to the side. But we did want to make this a global audience book so that you could be able to read it regardless of what country you're in, and then be able to read what's appropriate for your system. And I think that was a great approach, and I'm so glad that we included that. Tammy says, I pre-ordered mine. Thank you for that. Could not get it to come up on Amazon, but when you Google it, it comes up on Walmart, Target, Barnes & Noble, and Thrift Books. Awesome. I didn't know that. I had just looked at the quick Amazon link. So that's really cool. That's good news. That's new to me. So that's awesome. So there you have it. If you don't want to just do Amazon, it's available from a lot of different sources. That's really cool. That definitely brings a smile to my face. You know, it's just one of those things. And for those of you, not just Tony, but any of the rest of you that may have written a book, that's a concern. You write a book and you think nobody's going to read it. And you put all this work in. Now, thank you to all of you who've already pre-ordered. Thank you to all of you who I know will order it at some point. And thank you to all of you who may receive it as a gift and you've just discovered me as a result of getting it as a gift. And now you've gone back and you're looking at all my old videos. Thank you to some of you as well. I know that someone will come across this live stream months from now because they read a book. And that's the part about it that is just so amazing. It just keeps on going and keeps on going. Samantha says, congratulations on the book. Thank you. I started seeds yesterday, zone 6 for the early spring garden, onions, spinach, and Swiss chard. What seeds are you starting this month? So this month I'm actually starting my perennials. So I've had seeds in my refrigerator stratifying for weeks now. And so I want to get my annuals in particular. So I'll be starting some pansies and petunias. I talked about in recent live streams about that process. Normally, I start my plants to put in the ground as a transplant, and then they grow and flower and fruit. But I do want, particularly with the pansies and petunias, because they'll flower the whole season, to actually start them a little early so that they are either flowering or budding, close to flowering, when I put them into the garden in May. It's still way too early for me. My last frost doesn't come till May. But that's what I'm going to be doing this month. I'll be doing some herbs as well. And I want to start, I grew a bunch of rosemary from seed a few years ago. And I wanted to test the limits because most rosemary is only good to zone 6. And I live in zone 5. And sure enough, I killed all my rosemary that I left outside, either in pots or in the ground. It's happened before. I knew it was going to happen. I was trying to see if I could protect those plants enough to get them through my winters, and I couldn't. So I'll be starting some rosemary and some of those herbs again this month. It's still a bit early. This would be the time I would be starting onions, but it's a year I'm not doing onions, partly because of the book. So I'm anticipating some travel. I'm anticipating some other events that are going to be coming up. They're going to be interfering with my big gardening time. And so I've cut back on some of what I'm doing this year. So just some of those hardier perennials and herbs is what I'm starting on. And then I'll be able to move on from there. Yeah, there you go, Jay. Thanks for the home soil testing. Yeah, if you go to RX Soil and use the Gardner Scott code, you get 10% off. So that's a saving of a few dollars. Always a nice option. Hey, it's Eli and Kate popping in for a listen, but won't be able to chat. Excuse me, I swallowed wrong. So for those of you who follow Eli and Kate, you'll see their garden in the book as well. They were gracious enough to share some of their photos. And like I was saying earlier, they're recognized in that copyright section for the photos that they have of their garden. Beautiful gardens, beautiful beds that are in the book. So good to have you here today, Eli, and so excited about the opportunity for your photos and your garden to be seen as well. Serena asks, when will your book be available in libraries? I don't know. So the books are about to be shipped out to the bookstores in the next week or two from the questions I've asked. I haven't asked about the libraries. So I'll ask that question and see if I can find an answer. And I'll do a follow-up probably the beginning of next month when the book actually comes out and let you know some of the answers. I really don't want the focus of this live stream for the rest of the year to be about this book. So next week and the week after and the week after are completely different topics, and we won't be focusing on the book. But beginning of the next month, when I have some of these answers, we'll talk about it again, and I'll let you know some of those other opportunities, libraries, online, bookstores, whatever else we happen to find. Bettina says, my local library has an online make a suggestion section where I always add in all my favorite books for them to purchase. There you go. So you could start with that, Serena. That's actually a really good idea. You could go to your library. I know that my library, it's actually a series of libraries throughout my county, but I know I can make a request at my branch and they'll find the book usually at one of the other branches. But that's probably how they decide what to order. And so if your library gets requests from multiple people and they know it's coming out on March 1st, my guess is that the library district will order a handful of copies for the people that would be interested in reading it. So yeah, let your libraries know too. And that's a good way to do it. Yeah, Shandy's Garden, thank you. We should all ask our local libraries to order Scout's book. Thank you. Yeah, that's one of those things that you just don't think about when you're writing a book. You're just focused on writing it. And now it's time to get it out to people. So I like that is an opportunity. So let people know. Masabi Gal says, I plan to burn the inside of my newest untreated wood raised bed. Thoughts on that? Any info in the book? I have a brief mention of that in the book. So in the book, I talk about wood and methods to preserve wood. I talk about using different oils and how that can improve the longevity of a bed. And I think I have just a sentence or two where I talk about that you can char the side of the wood. And then I think I also say I don't do that in my area because of burn restrictions. I'm not sure if that actually made it into the book or not. But it works. There is a method of torching the side of a wood bed, and it essentially creates a hardened barrier, and it does improve the longevity of the wood. You have to be careful that you don't burn too much. You don't want it to turn to charcoal. You're just burning off that exterior resin, and you're basically changing the cellular structure with that internal resin and the exterior cells of the wood by doing just a light burn on one side of the bed. And especially on the inside, yeah, that can reduce the rotting of the wood, and it can make the bed last, or the wood last much longer in that bed. You have to be careful, and only because, like, for those of us that live in really dry regions, you don't want to burn down the rest of your garden by doing that, and you don't want to burn yourself. But just a hand torch, like a torch you would use to in the copper tubing the plumbers use, one of those propane type of torches, and just run it back and forth along the wood and just burn that exterior so that it changes color, not that full dark charcoal black, but close to it. Like a really, really dark brown, light black is essentially the shade you're looking for. And it can work. It really can extend the life of your bed. So not a lot in the book on that, but there is information about the preservation of the wood and trying to make your beds last a little bit longer. And I do have a picture actually from the Galileo garden of a bed that was falling apart at about the 5-year point. And I'm actually thinking of talking about that in the next book. But my books, particularly the books that are my beds, particularly my beds with the pressure treated wood, I'm now going into beds, or to year 6. And you can see in the photo behind me that the beds are still holding up great. Just directly here over my shoulder, you can see this is obviously an untreated bed, and the wood is beginning to crack, beginning to warp a little bit. And if you compare that to some of these other beds that have the browner color, those are the pressure treated beds, and they don't have that same reaction. So for me, in my Colorado garden, my beds last at least 6 years. And that's one reason why I built my beds differently, using different types of woods, is because it's a test to see how long the wood is actually going to last in my environment. And one of the ways to extend the life is preservation methods, to include the opportunity to take that torch and burn that outer layer to create that hard barrier that will reduce the likelihood of rot setting in. Maureen says, pre-ordered for me and my sister-in-law. Can't wait. Well, thank you, Maureen. Love something to hold and reference. I'm looking forward to the reviews. Now, I encourage you to do a review of the book if you order it from one of those online sites like Amazon. I love it. I really do. I fell in love with my own book. I would buy this book, and I have very little doubt that you will love it too. And so I'm looking forward to honest reviews. I mean, if there's something you don't like about the book, let me know, because as I move on and continue writing, I'll take that information to heart. And you see this, and so I reference square foot gardening in the book because many of us do square foot gardening, and square foot gardening actually works quite well in raised beds. It was designed for raised bed gardening. I also mention in the book that Mel Bartholomew, when he first came up with the raised bed or with the square foot gardening concept for raised beds, changed his process. So the first edition of square foot gardening is not the same in edition two. The second edition is the book that most of us have, and it's actually different than his original method in the first edition. I think that's not a bad thing. In fact, I actually admire that. If you write a book and say this is something to do, and you find out based on your own experience and the reviews and the advice of others, you may change your mind about certain things. And so, yeah, if this becomes a bestseller and they end up doing a second edition often has revised information. I'm I'm all about revising the information if it's more appropriate because the information has changed or the information can be better. So when you get your book, pass that on to me, what your inputs are, and I'll gladly listen and take it to heart. And you may see it in the future in a future book. You never know. And Bohemian Herbology says, and it's a garden picture book. Yeah, I'm pretty stoked. That takes it up a notch. I haven't actually counted the exact number, but I think there's 300 photos in the book. Now, some the section on how to build. So, for instance, on the section on how to build a wooden raised bed, I think there's 7 photos that just show how to build a raised bed. And on the section on a stone bed, I think there's 6 photos of all the steps to build a stone bed. So that chapter does have a lot of photos that are in the how-to section. But there are hundreds, probably close to 300 photos of different types of raised beds in different settings, with the plants in the beds, with snow on the beds, with beds on the side of a road, with beds in the middle of a field, with brick beds that are attached to a brick building. There's a lot of garden pictures in this book. So yeah, I do think it is a garden picture book. Even if you're not a raised bed gardener, I like some of the pictures just because it's like, oh, I like that picture, especially a lot of the ones from the Botanic Garden. When you can take a nice gardening picture and put it in a book, absolutely, that's one of those kind of things to consider. Llama Llama says we could use whatever you decide to send as an autographed note as a bookmark. Well, I like that idea too. Yeah. So I'm definitely going to be doing that, and I'll let you know when it's done. Uh, and I'll try to get it done so that when the book comes out, I can send you an autographed a bookmark. I like that idea. So uh, I'll figure out just exactly how to do that, and then I'll let you know the method so that we can get it sent to you and figure out what we need to do for you to give me your address. But I like that idea. I think that might be easier to do than a sticker. Uh, and and I think that's very doable. So my brain is racing trying to figure out what an autographed bookmark would look like. So thank you for these suggestions. I really think it is a good idea to try to get that aspect of it. Alora says, did you use any of the background photos we've sent you for the lives? No, and that's why I said for the next book, I want to do it a little bit differently. So many of your photos would have been ideal in this book, but because it was new, because I needed the copyright permission. So for those others who did some of the photos in the book, and it's just a handful, I had to do the specific copyright request of them to put the information in the book. And so that's a big reason why I didn't use your background photos. because while I have saved all of those photos, I haven't necessarily saved all of the emails. And so I couldn't contact the hundreds of you that have sent me pictures over the last 3, 4, almost 5 years now that we've been doing these live streams. And so I did not include pictures unless we got the specific permission to use copyrighted material. And that's why in the future, I'd like to take that opportunity to give some of you the opportunity to give me the permission to be able to use it in the book. So it's more than just you sent me a picture and I put it in the book. That's I would love to have done that, but there's more to that process. And that's why I wanted to make sure that we did it right. Rachel says there's no comprehensive info on trellising, plant support in grow bags, and raised beds that are not product sales driven. I have strong regular winds, still don't have a good method. So I've got some good discussions about trellises, and I've got some pictures about different types of trellises. I talk about how to trellis, and I've got examples of different trellises. And I do mention my winds in the book because last summer in particular, we had 75-mile-an-hour gusts in my garden. So yeah, I do have a section. I think it's comprehensive. I mean, it does cover everything from how to plan for trellising. So like, for instance, I talk about how when you decide to trellis, you should actually put the trellis in place and then put the plants in place. If you put the plants in place first and then put the trellis in, often you're going to break your plants depending on what type of trellis you're using. And then I give examples of different trellises that I've used. I've got photos of different trellises. And then I talk about how to use the trellis. And so the trellising actually is in a few different sections of the book. So in the planning section, I talk about how to plan if you're going to use a trellis. And then I actually have a separate section that is devoted specifically to nothing but trellises. And it talks about partly the planning, the planting, what you use, how to attach it to the trellis. I'll talk about the plants, different plants. And because some plants have tendrils that will connect to the trellis, and then other plants don't. They need something like a tomato clip to hold them to the twine or to the trellis. So I do have a section that talks all about trellising, because I think that's an advantage to raised beds, is it can really give you that intensive planting. And when you grow vertically, you need a trellis. So yeah, absolutely. There's a section in the book where we have the pictures of the trellises and how to trellis. And it's one of those options. And again, it's universal information. I have written it with the correlation of a raised bed, but the same methods can be used even if you're not growing in raised beds and open ground beds as well. Ellen Brown says, question, I just started some seeds indoors using a mini greenhouse with grow lights. I'm having trouble keeping my temperature and humidity controlled. The heat may cause the temp to be 100 Fahrenheit. Yeah, that's about 38 Celsius. So the thing about a mini greenhouse, and in my greenhouse videos, I talk about this a lot. Ventilation is the key. Whenever you're growing in a space like that, where it has a cover and it is insulating the air around your plants, you're going to have heat buildup. And unless you have ventilation, you're not going to be able to control that heat. And so whatever kind of mini greenhouse you have, you've got to look at that. How to open the ends, how to lift the whole thing, and so you have one side that's open, and that's how you control the temperature. You let cooler air in, and then as it heats, you let more cool air in. As it cools, you close it so that the lights generate more heat. And it's a lot of work. It can be a lot of effort, and particularly in a mini greenhouse. And depending on what that heat source is with those lights, it can probably build up pretty quickly. So in my greenhouse, even right now, so this week, thank goodness, The temperatures are climbing. It's going to be a wonderful week to get out and do some of those winter projects I need to do in the garden. But last week, the high temperature was 30 degrees, about -1 Celsius. I did not open up any of the vents or the doors in my greenhouse, and the temperature in my greenhouse climbed up to 95 degrees Fahrenheit, 35 Celsius. So even with below freezing temperatures outside, because the greenhouse was closed up, the temperature skyrocketed. And that's what's going to happen. The only way to deal with that is ventilation, and you've got to get out. So, as cold as it is, I'm going outside and opening up the windows in my greenhouse during the day to keep the temperature under control. And that's what you've got to do, whether it's indoors or outdoors, a mini greenhouse, a full size greenhouse. You just got to keep after it and get that ventilation going. And that's really the only thing that you're going to be able to have the control over to get it to a temperature that you want. Penny, thank you. I just pre-ordered my book. I'm excited to start learning from it. Thank you for that. And so let me know as well. And again, I'll give you information about this next month to tell you the best way to contact me. I included a lot of personal stories, a lot of where I was, what I did, how I learned this thing, what I was doing in my garden. And I'm not sure if Tony experienced this, but my editor edited out a lot of that fun information because the book is a reference book. It's a gardening book. It's a how-to book. It's a historical perspective of raised beds. It's a how to do soil, how to plan. And so they felt that the personal stuff kind of got in the way. And to keep it moving and to keep that information flow, a lot of that stuff was cut out. I still think it's good information. I love some of my gardening stories. So that's one of those things that is on my list of future books. Now, I don't think anyone right now would be interested in a Gardner Scott Stories book, but potentially along the lines as a series of books, maybe we'll get to that point. So if that's something that you might be interested in, let me know. And maybe I can convince the editor at some future point to let me write a book with some of those personal stories, like my kids in the garden, or the first time I ate a tomato at my aunt's garden, and those kind of things. I think that's part of gardening. We all have those stories that have built us to become the gardeners that we are today. And I think some of those should be shared because a lot of us have those shared experiences. And if it's something that might interest you, let me know. And so Scott Joe's asking again, will you have autographed copies available? And so I'm working on that, Joe. We talked about that a little earlier, trying to figure out just exactly how I can do that, because obviously some of you are interested, and then we'll figure out what we can do. And so, and I see some discussion about searching for it on Amazon and not being able to find it. So the book has not come out yet. So I think once it comes out and once people have bought it, then it'll be easier to search for it. So that's why I put the link in the description below. I was able to find it as Gardner Scott's Guide to Raised Bed Gardening, Scott A. Wilson, and put that whole thing in, and then it still pops up with like 50 other books, and then you can click on that one. So once Scott A. Wilson becomes a search term on Amazon because people are buying the book, and once Gardner Scott's Guide becomes a search term because people are buying it, it should be easier to find. And when I typed in Gardner Scott's Guide, it came back as, do you mean Gardner Scott, with Gardner misspelled? So it doesn't know yet. It's a young AI that still needs to learn. And so as more of you order and as the book actually starts shipping, it should be easier to find. But yeah, at least right now, it may be a little more difficult to find in an initial search, but I put the link below. Days of Discernment. Congratulations on the book. Thank you. Looking forward to getting a copy. Your wealth of knowledge to help us have our best garden yet last year. Oh, that's nice to hear. And I know how to propagate strawberries because of you. Well, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. And I look forward to letting me know what you think of the book and what you can learn. And I've got some pictures of my strawberry bed and pictures of the strawberries in this book as well. So strawberries are one of those things. I talk about propagating and talk about growing plants, and strawberries are in that particular section. So there's a lot of stuff that are definitely included in this book as it first comes out. So Tony says, I think I'm more excited for you, Scott, than I was for my own. Thank you, Tony. I appreciate that. And Tony knows. Tony's been there. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate your excitement as well. And shout out to Last Chance Goods and Services, a new member of the Gardner Scott community. So thank you for that. And it's one of those things that is a great way to show your support for the channel. So thank you for that. And I'll definitely, particularly on the Facebook page for that community, I'll be talking about more information of the book when it becomes available. And I've learned some of these things based on the questions that you now have all suggested to me that I ask. Hopefully I'll be able to get that information back to you. Sunset Gazing says, congrats, looking forward to getting the book and any future endeavors. Looking back, you were hinting at something big. Very cool. Yeah, there's been a couple times in the last couple months that I kind of did a little hint that this was coming. And because Eli knew it was coming. So the last time I had Eli on the show last year, I forget what it was, but I did kind of drop a hint because I knew that there was some new stuff coming because she was supplying some of the photos that I couldn't get. And I wanted to make sure those photos appeared in the book. So they were able to take some photos in their garden that I wasn't able to find anyplace else. And so they've known about this for a while. There you go. Robin Garden says, I searched with Scott A. Wilson book, Raised Bed Gardening, Amazon Prime, and it popped as the first item. Cool. I'll wait for it to hit at Barnes & Noble. I like to keep the brick and mortar thriving. Yeah, thank you for that. I agree. You know, it's easy to do on Amazon, and you'll get it right away with Amazon. But if you are a book advocate and like to read the books, yeah, check out your local bookstore and get it there. I like to support local as well, and I like to support the brick and mortar. We had an awesome Tattered Covers, an awesome bookstore based in Denver, and they actually opened here in Colorado Springs a couple years ago, and they shut down for various reasons. But it's so sad to see bookstores shutting down, and giving them to support is definitely a way to make it happen. So, so if you're just joining us at the end now, and you missed out on all this wonderful discussion, by all means, go back and watch from the beginning. But the big news is that Gardner Scott's Guide to Raised Bed Gardening, the book, is coming out on March 1st in the United States and April 1st in the UK, and to be determined for Australia and other countries. But if you go to your bookstore and let them know that you're interested in the book, I'm sure that they can figure out a way to get you that book. And then, of course, Amazon will do everything they can to get the book in your mailbox. So always an opportunity to find it. And I do encourage that you look at it. Now, I don't have my physical copy. I hope to have it soon. And so as I appear on some of the podcasts and the live streams around, you will probably see me again talking about the book. Once I get the book, I'll definitely hold it up and we'll be talking about it. And And I know I'll have it by the time it comes out. So when we talk about this next at the beginning of March, you'll be able to hold your copy, and I'll hold my copy, and go ahead and read it, and you can ask questions, and we'll talk about it again after it comes back. But for now, thank you, Jay, with the information, the link to do the pre-order. I do appreciate that. And I appreciate all of you. That's why I wanted to announce this to you. I could have done a video and announced it to the world, and I will. I'll have a video in the weeks ahead and announce it to the rest of the world. But I wanted to announce it to you, all of you in this wonderful community that we get together every week. And I wanted you to be the first. And so I'm so glad you could be here today and share this moment with me now that it's out and everybody knows. And I'm so glad that you could be a part of that. It is exciting. It is something that has been going on for a couple of years now, and it just feels so good to be able to share the information with all of you. So more information to come in the weeks and months ahead, and start thinking and send me an email to gardnerscott@gardnerscott.com if you've got an idea for how we can get autographed books disseminated. And I'll start working on the idea of an autographed bookmark. And I thank you all for your input, because you all helped make this happen along the way. And I appreciate you so much. Next week, very special show. I think you're really going to like it. I've been looking forward to it as well. No big announcements from me personally, but I think you're going to like the show. So hope to see you there next Monday. And thank you all who have already pre-ordered and will be ordering my book. It's fantastic. As we read our books and we get outside, remember, it's all about what we do, how we do, and making it enjoyable, making it something you want to come back to. That's what it's all about. So enjoy gardening, and I'll see you next Monday.